Okay, so now this is the another part of the JavaScript Basic 2, and in this session we're going to be looking at functions and objects, which is another type of reference type by JavaScript. So what is a function? A function is used to make code reusable. A function is defined to carry out more than one process, and then the function can be called as many times as you need it. One of the good things about using functions is that it enables you to not repeat yourself when you're writing the code. And so this is one principle that is kind of advised to programmers when they're writing their software. Try as much as possible not to repeat the code that you have written. If you find yourself having to do that, then this is when you might be thinking, I need a function to handle this process instead of repeating the same thing over and over again. Writing a lot of code, it's really just about writing efficient code that does what you need to do fast and cheap. So now let's look at functions. So to declare a function, so this is a declaration. To declare a function, what we need to do first is write the keyword function and then the name of the function. This name can be anything you want, but it's advisable to name it something that is descriptive of what your function is doing. And then this can take 0 or more parameters. So here we've got a parameter name of x and y. Again, you can name this whatever you want. It doesn't necessarily have to be x and y. And then you have the opening braces and then the closing braces. And then in between those braces, you then write what the function is meant to be doing. So let's do this with an example. In this example, we have function, and then the name of the function is multiply. We've taken in a variable of a and b, which is the numbers that we want to multiply, and then the opening and closing braces. And then you can see this return statement. So one thing about functions as well is that sometimes they can return stuff, and then other times they might not return anything. They might just modify a variable that's outside that function scope. And so in this case, we said that we want to return what the result is of a multiplied by b, and then it's closing by a semicolon. So like I said before, this is a declaration. This is where you declare your function. To call that function, you can call it this way by writing multiply and then passing in the numbers that you want to multiply with the semicolon. And so since this has a return statement, where do we store the value that is returned? This is why we've created a variable here. We've said var and then given it a name of results, the variable name result, and then we've said multiply 8 by 6. And so it's going to do what we told it to do inside this function, and then it's going to return the result into this result variable. Okay, now let's look at some exercises. Here it says declare a new function called movie title. Get the function to accept two parameters, movie name and release date. Return a string showing the movie and release date, and assign the result to a variable called movie1. You can then console log the result. Now let's look at play code to do this. Let's take off all of what we've written here. And then we said we want a function called movie title. And then we want to take two parameters called name. And then the second parameter is release date. Opening and curly brackets. And so what do we want to do here? So we want to be able to console log our movie title, name, and then the release date. And so if we just do that, console.log, and in here we have the backticks, because here I want to use interpolation. This movie is, and then $, and then name, its release date is, and then with that again, says release date. So this is our declaration. If we then want to call this is what's going to happen. Say movie title, and then we're passing in strings, and then the first one we want to say is 12 years a slave, and then the release date, not sure, but let's just say it was 12th of February 2007. And now you can see here that we have, this is 12 Years a Slave. Its release date is not date is the 12th of February 2007. So that was pretty straightforward. So this is what, and then it says to put this in, so we want to return the result of the string. So what I did here was console log instead. So instead of doing it that way, I can just come here and say return this result instead. And so here we can put this in a let, because that's better to use, and call this movie 1 and say equals to that. And so if we then console log movie 1, we can see that we have the same thing here. But sorry, I console log the movie title, which is the thing. So we can see this is 12 Years a Slave. Its release date was 12th February 2007. So this is how we use functions to do things. You can imagine that if we wanted to have more than one movie, we would have to keep on writing this over and over again. But if I just wanted to put in another variable, and like another movie name, for example, and I say movie title, I go in here and say something like Notting Hill. Sorry. And then the release date for this, let's just say something like 23rd March 1994. And so if I come here and say movie title 2, you can see that that has changed because I used a function, and it just makes it a lot cleaner and better. Okay, so we can put our functions inside. We can put if statements inside our functions as well. We've looked at how we can put in an input, do something with that input, and then either return nothing, or we can have an output as well. So in this case, let's now look at this function for verifying if a child has a discount or not. So let's come here. We have the function that says verify discount, and this takes two parameters, which is name and age. And then if we then say if the age of this person is greater than 18 or is less than 18, then we want to console log that they are eligible. You are eligible for this discount. Instead of you, I'll just put the person's name. Else, if their age is less than, so if that is then false, we then take this and say you are not eligible. You are not eligible for this discount, which is what we want to do in this situation. So let's see. So if we then call this variable, because we've declared it here now, but we've not called it yet. So if I say verify discount and I put in a name as Victor, and then let's say Victor's age is 20, you can see here that it says Victor is not eligible. Victor is not eligible for this discount. If I say Victor's age is 17, it says Victor is eligible for this discount. So you can see how very clean that is. I think at this point it is probably a good idea to then show you what I was talking about the difference between const, let, and var. And so now we have a function, and then we've got an if statement inside that function. And we mentioned that using the keyword var to declare a variable is function scoped. So that means inside a function where this curly brackets is, you can access that variable anywhere inside this function. And then for let, we said it is block scoped. So anywhere you see this curly bracket, you can only access the let keyword inside this curly bracket. So for example, let me show you what I mean. So if I had something like let, and then, or let's start with the var, and then I said var shop manager Mimi, and then I came inside of here and I said console logged backticks, and says shop manager applied discount. And so you can see that in this case where we have this, we're able to print out this whole thing about shop manager. Let me just take this out so it's not confusing. Oh, sorry. So you can see that we're able to access the variable shop manager in here because this is where, because our var keyword is function scope, so we can get that anywhere we want. If we like, if we put it in here, for example, and let's say we put in 20 here, did not apply discount, and you can see that it's showing shop manager Mimi did not apply discount. Let's just also console log it here just to see that we can also retrieve the shop manager name in here as well, and you can see that there's Mimi there as well. So with the var keyword, we can access it anywhere inside our function scope. So the scope is anywhere within this function. So what if we change that to let? You can see we still get the same thing because we've put this at the topmost part of this function scope that is between these brackets as well. But then you can see that we've got other curly brackets that we can restrict this let keyword in. And so if I then take this, then I put it in here, you can already see that it's starting to show error like shop manager is not defined, and that is erroring out because we've passed in 20 here and we're trying to print out the shop manager here, but because the let keyword is blocked scope, so because of this curly brackets, it doesn't know about shop manager, and so it has given us this error here. And so same as here as well, it's going to be the same thing. So in order to avoid stuff like that, you put it at the highest level, which is there, and then we are now able to access it there. I think we can do the same thing with const as well. Const behaves the same way as a let. If I take that and then put it in here, you can see that it gives us the same error because the const is blocked scoped as well as a let. So hopefully that makes more sense for what I said earlier. All right, so let's see. This is just yet another exercise that to create a shopping cart, and then which takes 3 arguments: item, cost, and balance, and then return whether you can afford it with a balance or not. All right, okay, so let's go in our play code and then do this. Write that function for our shopping cart. Let's take all of this out. So function shopping cart, and takes in 3 values, which is the name of the item, the cost of the item, and then the balance of, let's say, the user's account or something. So if we then say if the cost of the item is greater than the balance of the user, then we just want to console.log and say that you cannot afford the item. So $, then put in the item here. Else, if the cost is less than the balance, then we can then console log you can afford item. You can afford item. We can put in another keyword here that says else if, which takes in another type of condition. If the cost is equals to the balance, we can also say if the cost is equals to the balance as well, we can also say console.log you can afford item. You can afford this item. So I didn't put the backticks, so that's why it's looking like that. So if I come here and here as well, you can afford the item, but balance will be 0. And so now I introduced the else if here. If you have another condition that you want to check, you can always use else if. But then if all of the conditions do not match any of these, then it then does the last one. So now that we've finished declaring our function, let us now call it. So shopping cart, I'll put in a shirt here. Now say the cost of it is 200, and then we've got 2000. And you can say you can afford this shirt, but balance will be 0 because the cost is equals to the balance as well. If you had 2000 here, it just says you can afford the shirt. If you had 100, it says you cannot afford the shirt. So just easy ways of using this function to have our different outcomes of what the function does. Now let us then go back and see what else is there to look at. So looking at the function scope, I think now we've talked about block scoped and function scoped, but then there's something called local scope and global scope. So it says code here cannot use animal because animal is inside this function scope. It is local to this function here. And so we can use the animal variable anywhere inside this function scope, but we cannot use it outside of the function because we've declared it inside of here. But then if we wanted to use animal somewhere else in our code, we can put this animal variable outside of this function. So in this case, in the global scope where we can access it anywhere we want in our code, we put it outside of there, and then it says code here can use animal, and we can also use it inside the function as well because this does not belong to any function, and so we've put it at the top of our document, and so any function inside our documents can use the variable here. So that's just the difference between these two types of scope, of local scope and function scope. So keep that in mind. Now let's look at the last reference type, which is the type of object. And with this reference type, we've seen that our variables only take in one value. And so here where we had our var car and then the string, our objects are able to take multiple variables, multiple values, and then they do this with key value pairs. And so the key describes what value is being stored. So you can see we've declared an object, and how do we know this is an object? By saying the var keyword and then person and then equals to curly brackets, open and closing curly brackets, and then first name John, age 50. So the key here is just anything that you want to write, and it now has a type of string, age 50, which is a type of int, married, which is true, own cars, this now has an array, so we can save an array in an object as well, profile has an object, so we can save an object inside an object. And then we have the last one, function, which is the last type that we talked about. And we've passed in a function, but this function doesn't have a name. It just has a keyword. And we can do this if we want as well. If we don't want to give it a name, we can do that as well. And so this is what we've done here. And so now it says accessing properties can be done in two ways. Either the object name and then object property, which you have here, or key, or we can do it by object name and then putting in square brackets and then putting the property name here. So now let us just kind of look at this in our play code diagram here. So if we let's just take this out and set var person equals to, and we said first name, which our key is Mariam, and then age, another key, let's say 34, comma, so we're separating each value by a comma. I think what else do we have there? We had the Boolean value, married, which is true. And then if we go down again, we have own cars, which we want to have as an array, owned cars, or let's just say cars, so making that long. And then inside there we have a Fiat, oops, and then we also have a Range Rover, for example. And then here we've got profile. We can have a different object, so we want to put the profile here as height, and this height we want to say it's 6.7, so very tall. Color, or let's just see what else we have in there. It says profession, and she's a chef. And then the last one we had was function, which we can pass in what we call an anonymous function because it doesn't have a name. And we just said this function is going to return the value of 89. So now that we've declared this object, how do we then access the values in the object? So we can do this by console login, just to show you how we don't have to console log, but just we can put in a variable if we want. Person.firstname. You can see that the first name now shows Mariam. Let's say age 34, married, says true. If I don't want to do it that way and I want to do it the other way, let's say cars. You can see that this has Fiat, Range, and Rover. Since this is now an array, if I wanted to get Fiat, I have to put in the index, which is a 0 in this case, and 1, Range Rover. If I did 2, it's going to say undefined because I don't have the value. There's no like second indexed value that is there, so take note of that. If I wanted to go for profile, and see that now shows me the profile object. If I wanted to get height, I can come here, since this is an object, and say height, and that gives me the height, which is 6.7. I say profession here, profession, you can say this is chef. If you don't want to do it that way, you can always use the dot as well and say here profession, and it still gives you the value that you want. And then the last one we had was function, and you see that it is returned function return 89, and that gives us that as well. So this is just an object, and this is how you can access values of objects and how you can use them to store multiple data in your software. So take note of that because it's going to be very, very useful when we're using our JavaScript to our HTML. Now we have this assignment here. It just says to write your functions, doing some summation, subtraction, simple stuff, which is building a calculator. So if you do this and also reference the JS reference guide that I put, you should be able to have more understanding of what you're doing. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to send me a message and I'll be able to answer you.